Okay, the rules for being human. So this is actually it's a series of 11 rules. My goal is tonight to do 5. I'm not sure if that's ambitious or I'm undercutting it. So we'll see where we're at. Okay, rule number 1. In life, you will receive a body. You may like it or hate it, but it will be yours for the entire period this time around. Okay? Rule number 1. Okay? We get a body. Now it's interesting. Who does our body belong to? God. And so he gives it to us basically on I call it the 120-year Lend-Lease project. And you're familiar with, like, in World War I think, when we gave the Lend-Lease, we gave like a bunch of destroyers to Britain. I remember that, right? So, right, was World War II? That was right. That was a way of sort of helping out. And it's called Lend-Lease, means we lent it to them, they leased it from us, whatever it was, and that was what they used, right? So we go ahead, we have our body on a 120-year Lend-Lease. Okay, God gives us a body, right? This body belongs to us. Okay, for us to use and take care of. Okay, this body is not ours to do whatever we want, right? Because it's not ours. Right? It belongs to God. Right? And so he gave us rules and regulations on how to use it. Okay? So that's rule number 1. Okay? We got it. We have a body. God gave us a body. It's the first thing, and it's ours time around. So we want to make sure we take care of it. We want to make sure we exercise and we kind of, keep it in good shape. And that's what we have our body. Yeah.
Are there repercussions if you don't take care of your body, or let's say you tattoo it?
Yeah, you die.
Well, eventually you die.
That's not true. They don't die.
What, if you don't take care of it?
No, you have that too.
Oh, if you have that too. Okay. So very good. So it's a rage lately that lots of people have gotten tattoos, but God says we're not supposed to mark up our bodies since they're not ours, right? And so therefore we don't do that. Wearing earrings are fine. The ones that go in the ears, the one I think on the tongues and the eyebrows. I'm not sure how appealing.
Why is that? Why is piercing your ears acceptable?
So it's a very fascinating question, and I've tried in my mind to try to. Well, it's actually interesting. For example, like what are nose earrings? Right?
In some cultures, that's standard.
In some cultures, and not only in some cultures, the Torah talks about it.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, sure.
Oh.
When Isaac got engaged to Rebecca, he got engaged through a nose earring.
Instead of a
Rebecca
ring?
was not a Jew then.
No. So that was the patriarchs. They were living according to the rules of the Torah, right? So, but that was what he gave her. He gave her a nose earring, right? So you actually see so that is. And so then the argument goes, okay, so then it has to be something that beautifies the body rather than makes it ugly. And so they'll tell you, well, all the people that are Gothic will tell you they think it's beautiful. They make those, I was through my travels this past 2 weeks. I've been in areas that aren't just maybe as conservative as Texas. I'm sure that Texas you have some of them as well. Right? There's a guy who had like these red, big things on his earlobe, like stretching out his earlobe. I mean, just like really, like quite a work of art. and I was trying to, it was just interesting. I was trying to think what would be something to say, right? They think it's beautiful, right? So what makes it not beautiful, right? Or how do you decide it? So it's actually fascinating. Rabbi Fried, who's the dean of Data, he went ahead and he was having a discussion with Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was the leading halachic authority in the world when he passed away in 1999. Okay, 1999. And what happened was, he said to me, what about, well, how come the earrings are okay? So he says he remembers as a kid, still growing up in Jerusalem, that when a baby boy was born on the 8th day, they went to give it to circumcise him. And when the baby girl was born the 8th day, they went to pierce their ears. So that was the thing that was done. And so the answer is, I guess it's things that stand the test of time, and not something that's a fad. And so that might be what's considered beautifying or not beautifying. But that would be the technical answer. Okay? But what is? But the answer is that our bodies are ours. God gave us certain rules. right? We're not supposed to do body art. We're not supposed to tattoo it, right? We're not supposed to kind of do different things to it, etc. I mean, I'll tell you an amazing story about tattoos. Every time I say that, like, it makes me cry. But it's there was actually a person who grew up and had a few nice tattoos, and then he ended up becoming religious. And it was very embarrassing whenever he would go to the mikvah, right? Because he'd be walking, and he was in the Marines, and so even the tattoos he had weren't maybe the most kosher tattoos on, and what happened was it would always be a very uncomfortable thing for him to do. So he would always go, and then Erev Yom Kippur, the day before Yom Kippur. So traditionally, all Jewish males go that day. So there's a big, it's like a Turkish bathhouse. We can imagine what it is. It's when women use the mikveh, everyone's got their own private room, their own private, right? They go by themselves. And with the guys, it's like, it's kind of just, keep them moving, right? Okay, so in this huge Turkish bath, so he would go and he would kind of get dressed and kind of, like, would try to keep a towel wrapped around himself and kind of, like, go and kind of keep the towel and kind of slip in the water as he got him, just underneath the water, and then come back up and be fine. And what happened was, he went ahead, and as he was doing this, he slipped and he fell in the mikveh. And there was a commotion, and everybody stops. And everybody looks, and there he is lying on the floor, without his towel, right? Just humiliated, right? Really, just totally humiliated. And a Holocaust survivor came over to him and said, we're both survivors. I have my tattoo, and you have your tattoos. Let's go together to go to the mikveh. And that was the story. But you asked about tattoos. So that was the concept, right? That we grow up and we might not know the laws about what we can do, should or shouldn't do, etc. And so the answer is that we're supposed to. Right? Our body is not our own; it's given to us by God, and our job is to use it. Is to go ahead and to make use of it, and not to deface it. Okay, now it's also quite fascinating, as see people kind of get mixed up a lot. It means if I say to you, point to yourself. Point to yourself. Okay, everyone take your finger, hold your finger, point to yourself. Okay, so most people point to their heart. So people say, on my heart. Except, God forbid, if somebody needs a heart transplant, do they become a different person? No. So you're not your heart. And we all agree we're not our hand, right? God forbid someone lose a hand, they're not the hand. Right? That's actually one of the things, actually quite fascinating. There's a few Olympics going on over this past 2 weeks as well. I don't know if you saw it, but there's a guy that was a double amputee. I think he grew. Yeah, amazing. And he actually he qualified for the Olympics. Just an amazing human being. It's just an amazing feat. It's fascinating. That compared to the Siyum Hashas. One's an Olympics of the body, and one's the Olympics of the soul. Kind of just quite a fascinating dichotomy of this. Right? But it would be, he doesn't change anyone because he has a leg or doesn't have a leg. Right? It's not who you are. So if you're not your hand, you're not your heart. So point to yourself. Again. Okay, so now people start pointing to their brain. Right? Alright? Okay, so now the problem is that in a few years from now, they're going to figure out how to do brain transplants. And what they're going to do is, and by the way, that's my plan, if you just want to know my plan. Right, in a few years, I'm going to deposit a couple million cells into a Petri dish. They're going to grow a nice, buff Rabbi Epstein. Okay, and then one day I'm going to walk in for my appointment, and they're going to attach 2 alligator clips onto my ears and 2 alligator clips onto the neck. They're going to press a button and swoosh, and all my information is going to flow from the old body into the buff Rabbi Epstein. Who's the real Rabbi Epstein?
Wherever your brain is, or your consciousness is.
Oh, so wherever your brain is, or we call it, where your thoughts and your feelings, okay? Right, where your thoughts and your feelings are. And in Hebrew, we will refer to your thoughts and feelings as your neshama, as your soul. Okay, that's your soul, right? Your soul, right? Your soul is who you are. Okay, right? That's who you are. So you're not your body. So you have your body. Your soul has a body. Okay? But that's sort of rule number one. You get this body. And if you don't have this body, what happens to you?
Your soul leaves.
What?
Your soul leaves.
Your soul leaves. I mean, your soul doesn't die, right? Souls don't die, right? Your soul doesn't live or die depending on whether it has a body or not. It just changes forms, right? When somebody passes away, right, that person didn't die, right? It was just a separation between the body and the soul. But there's still the same soul that they were before, right? So a soul before it gets a body is a soul, right? The soul after the body is still a soul, right? You go ahead, your soul exists. Right? You have your body, but your soul exists. So what happens is you go ahead and you have your body and you have your soul. You get your body. The body is yours for the whole time around. Fascinating. When we live in this world, we tend to have a struggle between our body and our soul for the real me. Right? Right? Will the real Benzi Epstein stand up? Right? Mm-hmm. Is it your body? Or is it your soul? Right? And there's that struggle that takes place. Right? That struggle between your body and your soul. Or as our sages say, it's between the horseman and the rider. Who's in charge? The horseman or the horse? And who picks the route on which they're going to go? And who's picking the direction in which they're going to? And that's the struggle that takes place between the body and the soul. Right? Who is calling the shots? Yeah.
Well, why doesn't it be a struggle? Why can't it be like, some kind of balance?
Some kind of balance. Well, the answer is because your body likes body things and your soul likes soul things.
No, that's what I'm saying. So let's say you want like a nice steak.
Right.
So your body wants a nice steak.
Right.
You choose which steakhouse you visit.
Right? And let's say live in Dallas where there really are no good steakhouses.
I'm saying like
kosher steakhouses.
So
there are very good
so
steakhouses by the way in
from,
Dallas. So I go to New York and I eat in all the steakhouses that I can eat, and then I come back to Dallas and
that's what I did.
right? Okay. Now I'm back in Dallas and I don't have it. So now I have so my body wants a steak. My soul says great, but it's got to be kosher. Right? You gotta be kosher, right? It's gotta be kosher, right? And so now I'm having this struggle. So the answer is that you can't have it both. One person's got to call the shots, and then that's the struggle between the body and the soul. So it's fascinating because really the soul doesn't need a steak, right? The soul is happy with water and bread, right? Because the soul, right? But God says.
No, I think the body would be happy with water and bread.
If it's Batya's challah, I would be.
Well,
The body has the basic needs.
well, it's interesting. When we're using the body is your desires. Okay, so it's like your physical desires. Okay, so that would be right the cheeseburger, right? Whatever it is, right? That what your body desires. So you have this struggle between the body and the soul. So the soul just says, I just need enough food to exist, and to keep my soul attached to my body. So God makes a fascinating thing. God makes it that if your soul doesn't take care of your body, you know what happens? Your soul can't stay down in this world. Right? What happens is your soul says, I'm interested in spiritual pursuits. Right? I just want to sit and study Torah all day. Right? What happens?
Your body will die if you don't.
Your body will die. Right? And so you cannot stay in this world. Right? And so God charges the body, the soul, to take care of the body. Right? I mean, then that's why we have commandments, right? We have commandments. You have to, right? You can't do dangerous things, right? You got to feed your body, right? You got to do things to take care of your body, right? Because the soul is commanded, right, to take care of the body. That's how God keeps the two connected, right? God keeps the two, right, making sure that they're taking care one of each other. Now, but the question is, who's the lead? Right? Is it the body who's in charge, or is it the soul that's in charge? Right? Which one is leading? Which one is leading the party?
But you couldn't do any mitzvahs. The soul by itself can't do any mitzvahs.
Right.
Without the body.
Correct. Because it needs the body.
But the body technically could do mitzvahs without the soul.
No,
No.
because the body died, but it doesn't have a soul. But you're right. But God says you need to. I was in the car this morning, and I was saying, okay, I got to put on my tefillin. I want to try to put it on before a quarter of the day goes by, right before a third of the day goes by. So I needed my body to wrap my tefillin up, right? If I didn't, I wouldn't be able to do it, right? So we need our bodies, right? We are not anti-bodies, right? We like bodies, right? But the body has to be subservient to the soul, not the soul subservient to the body, right? Which is kind of the challenge that sort of happens is that we go ahead we have the wrong one leading what's going on, right? It's really we want the soul leading the body, not the body leading the soul. Okay, so rule number 1 is you get a body, right? You may like it, you may hate it, but it'll be yours for the entire period that you're here. Right? That's it. We have our body, right? And our job is to to take care of it. Okay. Right, and that's why we're commanded. We have it for as long as we're alive. Rule number 2. Very important rule. You will learn lessons. You are enrolled in a full-time informal school called life. Each day in this school, you will have opportunity to learn lessons. You make light the lessons, or you think them irrelevant and stupid. But life is all about learning lessons. The good news is, if you don't pass the test, you don't pass the lesson, you'll always get it back again. But life, okay, life is called an informal school called life, which is lessons, okay? It's all about learning lessons. Right? Who is the classic Jewish figure to have this life called lessons? Abraham. Right? Abraham. Right? Abraham was the patriarch of the Jewish people. He had 10 tests. Right? And again, mind you, Abraham's 10 tests, right? The ladder of his tests, right? When he passed test number 1, if he had test number 10 at the beginning, would he have been able to pass it? No. It's a ladder, right? It's kind of when you work out, right? You start off working out, you can barely do it once, but as you do it more often, you build up your muscles. So life is a full-time informal school called life, and we're here to learn lessons. Okay? We don't like the lessons. Tough, but learn them anyway, because you will need them down the road. Yeah?
Are our lessons independent of everybody else?
Oh, yeah. You see, in Judaism, we are running our own race. My race isn't to be as good as the next person, because God created the other person with their goodness and kindness and whatever, and so therefore, they start from where they start, and I start where I start. So how could you ever compare one person against another?
So there's no contingencies
What do we contingencies?
on someone getting this lesson for you to pass your next lesson?
No. In fact, it's sometimes problematic, because sometimes you need to dance the tango. And if your partner is not up to the same dance lesson as you, they might show up at the wrong club. Are you following?
Yeah.
Right? So what happens is so you have a lot of that, right? That where you are could be dependent on somebody else, and if they don't do the lessons that they need to do, you won't need help. Or if you don't do the lessons that you need to learn, they might wait, or they may not wait, and they may move on, and you miss the rendezvous. But my life, right, I always have to wake up and look in the mirror and have to say, okay, am I doing what I need to be doing? Right? Am I learning the lessons that I need to be learning? Right? Am I doing the pieces that I need to be learning?
And how do you know that? How do you know the lessons that you're,
that I need to be learning?
yeah.
Because if they come my way, that means I need to learn them. I just had a 24-hour-long lesson in patience. Right? I went with a few of my children. And on the way back, it was actually a little less crowded. On the way back, we were on we had 6 kids both ways, but we picked up the 7th and was driving around with the 7th. So on the way back, we only had 6. And we dropped off some of the luggage, so it was a little more roomy. And the kids are kids. In a very funny way. My daughter came right before I left for class. She says, "Are we going to go in the in winter, like in winter break? Are we going to go back up to the East Coast?" I said, "Well, I learned my lesson. I heard you were very unhappy on the trip, so I don't think it would be good to take you on the trip. So I don't think that that's a good idea." She goes, "Okay, you're kidding." I said, "But I heard you loud, like you were very loud in some parts of the trip. You weren't excited about going. You were unhappy with some of your passengers." I said, "So I learned my lesson. You taught me well." Right? So I was sitting here, and they were going at it. And I had a few choices to make. Because we as parents, the only thing we ever want our children to do is get along. Right? And so I'm sitting here and I'm going, so I have a lesson that I have to learn how to be patient. Right? And to maybe put myself in their shoes. Right? And kind of, right?
With all the trips you do, don't you think that lesson has sunk in?
I thought it did. But obviously I was wrong. And I could tell I was wrong. You know how I could tell I was wrong? Because it was annoying me. Right? So that meant that I didn't learn the lesson. Or I might have learned the lesson. I learned what?
New lesson.
A new lesson. Or I learned it a year ago, but I forgot it. Right? But that's what you need to do. Yeah.
So God tested Abraham sequentially.
Right.
And so he was always ready to meet the next thing.
Right.
And so we in life today sometimes our lessons become challenges that a child challenges you on a given day that you're not equipped to deal with yet. And we're just trusted to do our best in
Well,
that
okay,
situation.
so God is always involved in our lives. Right? God is, every Jew has what's called hashgacha pratis, where God is intimately involved in each of our lives. And when we go like this, God goes like that. When we go like this, God goes like this. And God mirrors us. And so he keeps on feeding us everything that we need. Now, we might come to a test and we might say, and it's just fascinating, because we think that what does it mean to pass a test? You see, I'll give you an example. Let's use my kids. Hypothetically, let's say I yelled at them on this trip. Right? So did I fail the test? I would say you should be yelling at them, so you failed the test. Right? But maybe I needed to learn it. Maybe I was supposed to fail. Because that gets me thinking, and that helps me become a better person. Right? So the pass and fail is not black and white. It's not yes or no. It's not did I check the box or did I not check the box.
You said maybe you were supposed to fail it?
Yeah.
So he questioned himself.
Right, and that becomes a catalyst now of change down the road.
Okay.
Or maybe the next time I see somebody else yelling at their kids, instead of being judgmental and saying, if I can control myself, you should also. Because I understand that person. Right? And look how hard they're trying not to. But right. So maybe meaning the lesson isn't always the black and white lesson that would seem to come up. Right? It's sometimes that I messed up, but that's okay. Right? Because as long as I'm willing to learn from that mistake, right? So then it's no longer a mistake. Then it's a piece of my lesson. It's part of my lesson plan. Every once in a while, the trainer will give me something to do that I can't do. Did I fail? Or you only fail when you don't try. Right? It's a very important piece. Right? Because people say, I failed. I say, no, you didn't fail. The only way you fail is if you don't try. if you try, you've done your job. So then everything else is great.
Because we're not responsible for the results.
Because right. Because remember, we're not responsible. We do not control the
Right.
results. There are no results that we control. It's fascinating. And when you actually kind of think about it and boil life down, there's really not a lot that we control. Yeah.
So then how can you be, let's say, like you said, you were in New York and you went to visit with the greatest minds in the
Right.
world, right?
Not the greatest minds, the greatest sages.
Sage, right?
A sage doesn't mean that they're the most brilliant people. It means that they are the people that live, that the embodiment of Torah. Right? Do you understand? Right? It doesn't mean that they're the most brilliant people, but it means that they embody Torah. Right? Just that point.
Okay, you just ruined my question.
What?
You just ruined my question.
I read the question. Okay, I'm sorry. Means there's a famous story with Aristotle. And Aristotle is a great philosopher, but as a human being, he was not at the highest caliber. So somebody said to him, said, Aristotle, you're this greatest philosopher. He says, why aren't you this greatest, human being? So he says, what do you mean? He says, does a mathematician walk out of class being a square? Right? Just because I know all these great ideas, it doesn't mean that I'm a great person. I tell you the great ideas. It doesn't mean that I'm going to live by them. Right? And so that's sort of what it is. So our job is to try. Right? You understand? Our job is to try. The effort, right? We have to put in is the effort. Because remember, as Jews, we do not control the results. Right?
But it appears that Hashem gives us the appearance that we're controlling. Otherwise, we have to be able to work at something and succeed and it actually build and move us on to something else. And we have to have that appearance like we're building something. Otherwise, we won't continue to do it, right?
Yes and no. Sometimes. You know what it always reminds me of? The idea that always comes to my mind. You have a little child. You ever take them to the grocery store and they wanted to play in those carts that have the wheels, the driving ones, you put them in the driving wheels and the kids are busy turning the cart this way and turning this way, right? Right? And how much control does he have over the cart? Zero. But he thinks he's controlling it. Right? We're like those kids. We think we're in charge. When the only thing we're really in charge of, there's only one thing that we do control. Only one thing we control.
Free will decisions.
The free will decision, ourselves. Okay, what we choose to do. That's the only thing that what we choose to do. What we choose to try to do. Okay, but results we're not in charge.
So, so for example, if Hashem says you're going to make a lot of money, you're going to make a lot of money whether you go to college or you don't go to college.
Correct. And if God says you're not going to make a lot of money, lots of smart people who went to college and how much money they're making, they have zero. Mm-hmm. And I know lots of dumb people that are much richer than me. And I'm wondering, how did they get so rich? Right? The answer is very simple. Now, it doesn't exempt me from trying and going to learning a livelihood and putting it into practice and trying to do the right things, right? To try to do right. But that's the effort that we charge. That's my effort. But that's not the results. It means I'll give you an example. Let's say God made Bill Gates very rich. Right? Warren Buffett. Extremely wealthy. Right? Now, let's say Warren Buffett only uses 10% of his mind to achieve what he has. Let's say he didn't push himself. When he gets upstairs after 120, what is God going to say to him? Did he pass or did he fail?
Could have achieved so
You could have achieved so much more, and instead you did this. You failed. He said, "But I'm the what, second, third, fourth, fifth, or 10th richest person in the world." So God said, "Yeah, but I gave you the brains to be so much more, and to do so much more, and you didn't do it." Right? So his success and failure has nothing to do with how much money he makes. His success and failure is how much he tried. And you have the poor guy who worked his brains out and dies penniless. But they tried their best. When they get up to heaven, what's God going to say to them? "You're my hero." Right? And that's really because we're all running our own race. You know, that means we're all running. Each and every one of us, we have our own race that we're doing. And our job is to get me down, right? To do the right things, because everything else is irrelevant, right? We'll come across in our lives. We'll come across many lovely people. We'll come across jerks, right? Does it have a relevance of what I'm doing the right thing or not? No, it's irrelevant to me. You know, right? You know, I saw a great bumper sticker, right? He who dies with the most toys wins. Let me see those bumper stickers. Great bumper sticker, right? Not true. It's cute. It's not true, right? He who puts in his best effort and strives for the best, they win. Now, why does God give the guy with the most toys the most toys? We could think of a few. We could, on our own, come and think of some good reasons why God does that. Right? Why do you think God would do that?
It gives you resources to help.
No, but the person who's not trying his best.
Oh, because that's his challenge. That's his tikkun to overcome.
Maybe that's his challenge. Or even I would say a more ghastly answer.
It's our challenge.
What?
It's our challenge.
Oh, maybe it's our challenge. It's our challenge to overcome, and God used him as the.
Because he's getting everything now.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Right. Or maybe God's just giving him all his reward now, and actually those toys are actually taking away from what really should be, what really could be his. So in fact, those toys then are not helping him; they're destroying him. But that's what he wants. That's what he considers important. It's fascinating. Right? So all of a sudden, you're looking at that like, should we ever be jealous of somebody else's toys? No? Because that could be the worst thing in the world to ever happen. Right? It's fascinating. Right? But because that's not what life's about. It's not about getting the most toys. It's about trying our best. We making the right decisions. And lots of times we try to do things and it doesn't pan out. But we try. Right? And so in Judaism, we're going to get rewarded for what we try, not for what we accomplish. Because accomplishment is not my job. Yeah.
Is every lesson, is every challenge that we have a lesson from God?
Sure.
Every challenge we have is a lesson.
I have a student who's a psychologist. He said, Betsy, I'm curing my patients. I said, how are you curing them? He says, I'm teaching them Torah. I said, what are you doing? He says, I had this lady that came to my office and she couldn't stand her boss. Like it was like fire and water. He said, so I just told her, and this was actually not Jewish, not Jewish woman. And he sat there. He says to me, he said, why do you think God put her in your life? He said, maybe God's kind of, helping you out. That this is your challenge that you have to overcome. Or maybe He's paying you back for all the things that you weren't supposed to do, and that's how He's doing it. So every time this lady comes, instead of seeing this monster, maybe see this lady as an angel with like white wings and a halo over her head, because she's doing you the best favor in the world. The lady never came back anymore. She was done. She got over the problem with her boss. So that's amazing because what happens is as we go through life, we have all these and so vast. It's because it's like because we're all intersecting with each other, right? And so that means each of these intersections that take place is from God. You know what the Talmud says? You want to hear an amazing thing? The Talmud says when you need a quarter and you stick your hand in your pocket and you pull out a dime instead, it says, do you know that's God like dinging you? That's a punishment for you? And so that way then, you know, for one past thing that you had done wrong, so now you're okay. Because really, if you stick your hand in for a quarter, you should pick out a quarter. Isn't that amazing? The Talmud says, you know, go find great sages to be friends with. He says because that adds a layer of protection. Because if anything bad is going to happen to you, the great sage is going to be pained. And he doesn't deserve to be pained, so God will spare you in order to spare him. Right? So the world is all interconnected. Right? That's how the world is built. And all these interconnections, all these pieces that intersect and connect one to the other. And our job becomes a job of making the right decisions. Right? Learning the lessons. Right? Because each of these lessons are amazing. And we might need them. And again, we will need them. That's why we're getting them. And I always tell people, you want to know what your job in life is? I said, look in your toolbox. Right? Look in the skills that God gave you. I said, because then you'll see what you're supposed to be doing. Because God gave it to you, right? Because that's what you need to be doing. Right? That's what it is. Right? But everything in life, it's a lesson. Right? There's something for me to learn. Right? There's a piece that I'm gonna learn, a piece that I'm gonna get or figure out or come across, and at that point in time, that's gonna go and that's gonna help. Right? Amazing thing. Right? So you're enrolled in a full-time informal school called life. Right? Right? And they're all built one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other. Now, there is a point that you can max out. Right? And you finish and you're done. Anyone have an example of that?
Isaac.
Very good. Isaac. Right? Isaac, when he got bound on that kid, when he got bound on the altar, like we don't hear much about Isaac. Right? That's it. Like Isaac is done. We have a story about him praying for kids and then giving them blessings. Right? But Isaac, really, we don't have. Right? Abraham, we have all these blow-by-blow accounts. Right? You know, he's building up these 10 tests. Right? Bing, 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 bing. Isaac goes, he aces a test. Right? He goes, he becomes subservient to God, right? He comes to the level of totally making God the center of his life, right? He's able to pass it on into the Jewish people, and Isaac is done.
So does that subscribe to the contention that, like, if you pass all your tests, you don't necessarily pass on at this time, but all of a sudden life becomes easier?
So it's very fascinating.
Isaac's life wasn't easy, was it, really?
Well, Isaac?
Yeah.
Right.
Why? Because of his children fighting?
Yeah.
Well, till that one point, he thought children, right? And it's amazing. Jacob, when Jacob is 100 and 108. So Jacob is ready to retire. Jacob said, "My life, it's been done. Right? I'm ready to retire. I'm ready to go the old age retirement." And then God brings upon him the story of Joseph. Right? And he's torn up for the next 22 years. He's right, like life is like a living hell. Right?
But Isaac was still alive when Joseph was sold.
Yes, and Isaac knew what happened.
Yeah, he knew, but that wasn't easy for him.
No. It wasn't. It wasn't easy for him that Jacob was in so much pain.
Because he had to seal his mouth.
Right. He couldn't tell it to Jacob because if God doesn't tell it to Jacob what really happened, he says, "Who am I to?" And so Jacob had to go through this own refinement, okay, or this lesson to be learned, right? And so the Talmud has a great expression. It says, Isaac, Jacob, it's not enough that you're going to get all this reward in the world to come. You want it easy in this world too? Right? Like, you want your cake and eat it too? No, can't happen. Growth. Right? It's growth. It pushes growth. See, it's fascinating. You know what pain does?
Causes change?
Causes change. You decide good change or bad change. But one thing it doesn't let you sit where you are. Right? It pushes us. And we have to choose which way is it going to push us. They're going to push me up or they're going to push me down.
There's so many masochists out there that there's people where the more pain they get, the more they try and bring others down to it.
Right. And our job is not to be sucked down.
Here comes the question.
Yes.
It's our choice to go down or to go up. Is that not how God wants it if we go down? Or is how we want it? Is that not God's will, whatever is happening in our lives?
No. No.
Okay.
God wants us to be great. God wants us to be awesome. God wants us to pass this test with flying colors. God wants us to be these super beings, these unbelievable people. Right? That's what God wants. And sometimes we let him down. But God is our loving Father who sits there and takes it and keeps on cheering for us to step up to do the next best
Really?
thing.
Is that not how he sets everything? Is that not true that he set everything in motion and let it be that way?
No, absolutely
or
not.
we decide what we decide everything, or he decides?
No, he gave us the free will. We do not do anything. We control nothing. There's only one thing we control. How we react to something, right? There's nothing. Let me tell you something. Should I show you how little you control? Like you want to be scary. Like you want to see how little you control. Okay. That was a resounding yes. Okay.
Yes.
Did you pick your parents?
Yes.
Actually, yes. Don't
Okay. Right? Did you pick?
According to your teaching, yes.
That's what the Talmud
According to
says.
my own understanding, no.
Yeah, no. God, don't cheat. You already gave the answers. You got it right. Right? You don't pick who your parents are. Right? They're the biggest influence in your life. School. Do you choose which school you go to? You did not choose your elementary school. You did not choose your preschool group that you went to. You did not choose your high school. If you chose your college, if you think you chose your college, you really didn't choose it. Because you really just chose it based on the information you got in the preschool, the day school, and the high school that you went to, which already was chosen for you. So you really didn't have nothing to choose with that. Right? And you just go on and on. There's really not much that you control. I hate to break the news. Right? You really control nothing. What do you control? You control yourself. And how you react to everything. That's really what you control. Yeah.
So every event or everything you go to or everything you do, while you think you're making a decision to go or not to go, you're really not making that decision?
Correct. How many people make a decision to go to class and get a flat tire on the way and never make it?
Because they weren't supposed to go.
Right? And how many people think they were showing up to somewhere else and they end up showing up and there was a class going and they decided? Not that many, but it happens. Right? You understand, right? So what happens is, right, you really control very little. You control everything and nothing at the same time. Right? Because to control is to control yourself, which is the most amazing thing. Right? That's what you control. But all the pieces that happen to you, it's from God, nothing to do with you.
Okay, so you look at a time period and you look at all your activities of what you did, and and you said all we do is we control ourselves.
Right.
It's your reaction.
For example, what's an example of controlling yourself?
Your action.
I drove from Baltimore to Dallas this past 24 hours. 22 hours. And don't want to forget the half an hour. Right now, my kids behaving in the back of the car. Did I control that?
No.
No. But what did I control?
How you dealt with it.
How I reacted.
The reaction.
Right? The reaction. Right? Is that right? Like, I controlled everything and nothing. And we forget, right, that that's really what we control.
But doesn't the reaction cause a consequence?
Oh, for sure it does.
So sometimes a reaction can redirect to another.
Correct. And then you have a chance again to make another decision. And you know how well it works when you tell your kids to sit down and keep quiet, don't you?
Yeah.
Right? The test just gets louder and repetitive. Right? And then you have a choice. What are you going to do? Because obviously you failed the first time. Right? You understand how that works. So the only thing we really control is ourselves.
Your attitude.
My attitude really what happens. And did I make the right decisions? Did I make the right choices in the decision in the right? But what happens? We are not control. Yeah.
But see, here's where I'm confused. If my reaction, if let's say all of a sudden I decide to just toss it all, then all of a sudden, whatever path I was on starts to veer, and the activities will veer along with it.
And now inside
Can I
those
control that?
inside those activities, you now control again. You control yourself. It means you keep on making decisions inside those activities.
So the end of this long journey is not at a predefined location.
Right.
There are multiple ends at the end
Well,
based on my reactions.
God has you where you're going to end up. You're just going to decide how you're going to get there.
So is it always veering back to that point?
God will get you there.
Okay.
How much pain you want to put yourself through is totally up to you.
Okay.
How many times do you want to hit your head against the wall? Go right ahead. Don't let me stop you. You know, if that feels good, go ahead and do it.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Right? Is that right? But that's because God has a plan. We now have to make those choices within those plans.
Well, I'm more with that gentleman. I'd like to believe I have more control, but I guess I don't. So I guess, you know, when your kids say you're a control freak or you like to believe you're control, you're really just choice freaks.
Right.
Choice.
Right? You're trying to make the choices, and you're trying to control things that really you don't control. Right? And really, I mean, that's why God gave us kids, I'm convinced. Is to show us that we really have absolutely no control. Right? In case you think you have control, come visit my house and see my 4-year-old decide when he's going to go to bed. Right? And, I mean, right, that's what happens, right? We go, right? That's why God gave us, God showed we have absolutely no control. We control how we react. Right? And it's amazing, because when we finally realize it, what are the things that we really control? Okay? And what we don't control, we get much better at it. Because we stop worrying about everything else around us. We start worrying about me. Right? And about what are the things that I really control. You know, it's an amazing thing. And, you know, it's you know, my brother-in-law had a he was in his synagogue, and there was a kid there that was there with the father, and he saw how well the person taught his child, not letting his child suck him in, but just setting the right example. He said he wanted to sit next to that person so he could learn how to be a parent. Right? You understand? Like that's an amazing thing, right? To be able to get that, right? Because when we realize that we don't, there's so little we control. You know, we think you're in charge of your life. You're in charge of that. You ain't in charge of it. Right? How many of our friends do we know that are smarter than us and making much less than us, or being miserable? See, we live in a society which is kind of sad. We live in a society in America where what do we value?
Materialism.
Material, it's clear. When I say there goes a successful person, what is that right away? What does that bring to mind?
Drivers, Mercedes.
Right, wealthy. Right, it's the first thing that comes to everyone. Right, and Judaism says that's ridiculous. He drives a Mercedes and is a lousy husband and a lousy dad. That's a successful person. And Judaism says that's retarded. Right, but what happens is we go ahead, we the value, we just kind of go ahead and what we put there, and even those things we don't even control. Right? How many smart people lost millions in the market over the last few years? And how many dumb people made a fortune? It happens. Right? Because God wants to show us we're not in charge of the results. We control ourselves and what we choose to do with it. And life is full of these lessons. Right? We're going ahead, we're learning these lessons and we're making those choices. Right? And learning to make those right choices. That's the home run. Right? Like picking the right decisions. And go ahead and that's how we ace the test. And that's how we become really great people. Right? We go ahead and we control ourselves. Right? And that's ultimately there was a great sage. He's called like the father of the ethicist, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. And he said when he was growing up, he said, when I grow up, I'm going to change the world. He got a little bit older, and he says, I'm not going to be able to change the world, but I'm going to change my country. 10 years later, he says, I can do my country, but I'll do my city. A few years later, not my city, maybe my block. He goes, maybe my block's too much, maybe my house. And he said, my house too much, maybe if I change myself, like that will be it. Because he understood this. Because that's where it happens. When we change ourselves, right, that's what we control. Right? We control our actions, our reactions to what takes place and how the world operates. And when we get that point, that's the home run. And then boom, we've hit the home run. Right? We've made it. We've got it. Like ding, 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 ding. We won. Right? Because that's what we really control. And when we really control ourselves, we understand we control ourselves. So then life is just a series of lessons, just a series of steps that's there to take me from point A to point B, giving me these lessons along the way to make the right choices. Right? That's right. That's what life is all about. Right? Making those right decisions. Right? And controlling what I can control, which is myself. So that's rule number 2. Okay. Rule number 3 is okay. Rule number 3. There are no mistakes. Very important. No mistakes. Only lessons. Only lessons. Growth is a process of trial and error. Experimentation. The failed, quote-unquote, failed experiments are as much a part of the process as the experiment that ultimately works. Right? So, there are, again, no mistakes, only lessons. Growth is a process of trial and error. Right? Experiments. The failed experiments are much of the process of the experiment that ultimately works. Growth is one of those amazing things. If somebody was to say to you, what is life? How do you define life?
A work in progress.
It's a work in progress. Hopefully. Lots of people have shut off the process. Right?
It still happens. You can do that, yeah. You can do that.
That's part of the choices we make.
Yeah, but it's still part
But
of
I'll give you an example. We call a tree, this tree is living, this tree is dead. Why do we call one tree living and one tree dead?
Continues to grow versus stagnant.
Stagnant. Okay? Now it's fascinating. Right? That's the universal definition of life is growth. Right? It means if we don't grow, we die. Right? A dead tree has stopped growing. Right? And so, I got the greatest email probably in 20 years of being a rabbi. I got an email today that a lady said, Rabbi, I'm finally ready to make the big step. Could you help? Right? And this is a lovely lady, sweet, kind, like just lovely. Lovely. And she says, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do it. Amazing. Right? Growth, life is growth. Now it happens to be fascinating because when we grow, it's uncomfortable. Why is it uncomfortable? Because we're getting change. Who here likes change? Don't all raise your hand at once.
It depends on what kind of.
Depends what type of change. Who here would like to win the Powerball? So the Powerball's up to 350. 305, 305 million. Who here would like to win the Powerball?
305?
Now you know that's going to be a lot of change involved in that,
Okay.
right?
I bought my
I'm a
ticket.
rabbi. That change I'll take.
I
Okay.
bought my ticket before.
Did you buy me one?
I only had $2.
Okay. What a friend you are. So you bought me the ticket. You would have won.
When is it over? Tonight?
Yeah, the drawing's tonight.
What time? 9 o'clock?
Is it too late?
9 o'clock or 10?
I bet you 9 or 10.
You
Okay.
better listen.
All right.
Hurry up,
Anywho.
I'm going to buy it.
No. This,
Until
this,
10.
I want to know one word of Torah is worth all the Powerball money in the world. Actually, a half a word of Torah is worth all the Powerball money in the world.
Victoria, you weren't supposed to buy a ticket. That's why you're here.
During the break, if you want to run out, okay. Right? So what happens is, right, so we like change. Right? So the answer is we like change. Change that's for the good. We like change that's not for the good, that we don't like. But change makes us uncomfortable. It stretches us.
No.
It leaves us in the infamous word.
I disagree.
Yes?
You say change makes us uncomfortable. No, not all changes.
Right. But I'll tell you why the change it does is because it leaves us vulnerable. Okay? I have to give up that I'm not in charge. Right? And I always like being in charge. I don't know about you guys. I like being in charge. And when you grow and change and you have to give up being in charge, that's when you start getting cold feet.
You already know you're not in charge of anything, so.
I need the reminder, because every time I forget it, because I like being in charge, until I remember that I'm not in charge. Right? So God shows me that I'm not in charge. Right? Okay. So what happens is, right? Is that we go ahead, right? And so we don't like to change because it leaves me. But that's life. It's fascinating. The example I love about this is about the crab. Crab. Yum. What was yum? Okay. Right. So what was right? So what they have like this. The crab. You know how the crab. You know what predator the crab has in the sea?
Humans.
Non-Jews.
Non-Jews.
Right, no, but you know what predator the crab has in the sea? The crab has its armor, right? Its hard shell. So when is the crab vulnerable?
Loses its shell.
It loses its shell. Right? We do what they call the crab losing its shell called? It's called molting. Right? What happens when the crab, I'll explain to you the process of the crab molting. What happens is the crab has this shell, right? It protects it. Now there's a good thing and a bad thing about the shell. What's the good thing about the shell? It protects the crab. What's the bad thing about the shell?
It can't grow.
It can't grow. And when it gets too snug, it can't grow, right? It gets too tight. So how does a crab get around this? The crab goes like this. it will molt, means it will shed its shell. And underneath its shell, it has a soft shell. And as soon as it gets rid of its hard shell, it swallows a lot of water. And plenty of water around. It swallows a lot of water and swells up. And then a few hours later, when the soft shell now is hardened, it spits out the water, and it has a nice roomy shell to walk around in. Okay. Thank you, Scientific America or whatever. Okay, right? Okay, right? It's called molting. What was it? What's it called? When that like Channel 30, Discovery Channel, maybe Discovery Channel. Right? Okay. So what happens is, right? It goes ahead, right? And it's amazing, and then it goes on for another month or two till it starts growing again, until it gets stuck against its shell. Now, the only time a crab is vulnerable, besides for the lobster pots, right, are the times when its shell is not yet hard. But it needs to shed its shell. It needs to be vulnerable. Because that's when it can go ahead and it can change it and it can grow. And that's us. Life is about change. It's about growth. Can't be afraid. Because otherwise we're not living. The good news is we're not in charge. The bad news is we're not in charge. Good news and bad news to tell you. Right? Right? But we are in charge of ourselves, which is really everything. Right? And so what happens is we have to go ahead and we have to remember that there are no mistakes, only lessons.
So,
Yeah.
what do you mean by mistakes?
Oh. So that's really the point I was going to say is take nachas in your failed experiments. When you do something wrong and it didn't work out, the tragedy is not that it didn't work out. The tragedy is when we don't learn from our mistake. You understand? This is an important concept. But it's not that we didn't work out. The tragedy is when we don't learn from our mistake. Yeah.
When Thomas Edison was making the light bulb, he went through thousands and thousands of different materials that didn't work before he found tungsten, but he never considered it a failure, he just eliminated one more that
Eliminate one
work.
thing that would work. That's what it, right? He said we can't be afraid of things not working. The failed experiments are great, right? As long as we learn the lesson. It means you know what a Jewish tragedy is?
No growth.
No growth. What? No learning, right? And it's what happens is it's something bad happening and us not learning the lesson from it. Right? That's the tragedy. Right? That's a tragedy. Because everything else comes from God. The only thing that we're supposed to learn from it is the lesson. If we throw the lesson out, that's the tragedy. Yeah.
So there was this, one of the police, escorts was saying, Rabbi Anderson that wrote this piece, he said, like, the guy said, oh yeah, like, I have some Jewish blood in me. My mother's grandmother was Jewish. So, what's the lesson for him?
Well, he has a choice to make. Is he going to come home, or is he not?
I honestly think the biggest Jewish tragedy is Jews who don't know why they're Jews.
Right.
Like right now, that's the big one. Why
Yeah.
are you a Jew? What does that mean?
Right. And what's our mission and purpose, and why are we here? What do you do? Especially when you have somebody checking out. Right? That's the tragedy. So take nachas. I don't know how to translate nachas. Take nachas.
Pleasure?
Pleasure. Okay, take pleasure in the failed experiment. Because that's okay. Because if you learn from it, then it's not a mistake. right? Of the soul. And now God puts it over there in order to go ahead to make it that your soul has to take care of your body. And rule number 2 is you will learn lessons, right? You are enrolled in a full-time informal school called life. Each day in the school, you have an opportunity to learn lessons. You may like the lessons or think them irrelevant and stupid. But they're your lessons, right? And how the lessons are laddered to our perfection. Rule number 3, there are no mistakes, only lessons. Growth is a process of trial and error, experimentation. The failed experiments are much of the process of experiment as the experiments that ultimately work. Right? It means that we can't be afraid to try, right, to go ahead and to do it. Rule number 4, very important rule. A lesson is repeated until learned. So if you don't like the lesson that you're on, don't worry about it. Keep on failing. Because it will come again. Okay? So a lesson is repeated until learned.
Do you pretty much recognize it, do you think?
Never.
No.
Because as long as you stay, you see, because when you can stay detached from the emotional aspect of it and logically follow through, you logically understand it. And logically makes sense. Like, right, this makes a lot of sense. Right? The problem is that we get emotionally involved and we stop thinking that way. We get caught, we get sucked in, we get pulled into it. A lesson will be presented to you in various forms until you have learned it. When you have learned it, then you can go on to your next lesson. Right? So that's the golden rule. Right? You get the lesson again and again. So don't worry about it. And again. And again. Right? There was a great movie that they made. I think it was called Hedgehog Day? Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Okay. Groundhog. Hedgehog, groundhog, whatever.
Don't worry.
Or some hog. Right? Okay. So, it's good. My students, I need to learn from them which movies. So, Groundhog Day, right? And he keeps on going ahead, right? The day just keeps on going and going until he's going to get it right. Right? And that's what happens. We just don't worry about it. Just relax. Take your time. Because it's always coming back around again. So if you don't like your finger caught in the door, then solve the lesson. Right? But yelling about it would just make it to stay stuck in the door. Okay? Right? So that's lesson number 4. Okay? You get these lessons. And don't worry about take your time. It's okay. Relax. You got plenty of time to figure it out. You got many more years of this, so just relax and enjoy yourself. Okay? Take your time. Okay? Right? And never worry about passing because you get it back again until you pass it.
Because you will pass it, is what you're saying.
Well, or die.
Or die.
Right? So usually at that point in time we figure out, right?
Then your soul will come back again to
Right, exactly. And if you miss it if you miss it in this life cycle, the good news is you get it the next one. Right? And so then you go ahead, you'll repeat it again, and you'll come to the same exact lesson. Okay, so just my suggestion is figure out how to solve it now. Don't wait for it to come down around again and again
But
and
it's
again.
more than one, it's a lot of different ones, right?
Of course it is. You should let me say something. There's a mistake people make. People think I grow and I got it and okay, I'm ready to move on. That's not growth. You learned what you need to do, but now you need to internalize it. And now you need to learn to take those steps again and again until they become second nature. I'll give you an example. Who here thinks we're supposed to be kind? Now, how kind are we supposed to be?
really kind.
Very kind. What is it?
Just right.
Just right. Right? And so what is very kind? Who's our model in kindness? Abraham, or more than Abraham. God. Right? There are 13 principles. Right? The 13 principles of the 13 attributes of God. Each one goes ahead and really stands for a different attribute that we're supposed to be. And a couple years ago we actually did a summer series on it, right? Entitled becoming God, right? Becoming God-like, right? Learning to become like God. And really, in each of those things, right? The famous thing that we sing, Adonai, Adonai, Rachel, Mechad, right? Those are 13 principles, right? Those are 13 attributes of God. Each one defining it, right? Tolerate others, And God, right, the first two is Adonai, Adonai. The first one is tolerate, right, people's weaknesses. And the second one is even, right, when the people go ahead and they sin against God, God still gives them life while they're sinning. Right? That's quite a level of kindness. So intellectually we could get it. But till we internalize it, right, till we internalize that, we're missing the point. Right? And so we have to learn to internalize, you understand, to get to the point where we not only learn the lessons, but we're able to internalize the message and learn how to become that way all the time. Right? You understand? That's where we need to get to.
Now, give it another example, sort of.
Okay, I'll give you another one. Patience. 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 Right? Having patience. Not the type you see. Right? Right? But you go ahead and you have, somebody goes in, somebody bothers you. Put up with it. Right? It annoys you. Now, should it really annoy you? No. Right? But you have to learn patience. Right? Because you understand where the person's coming from, what they're up to, and understand for them they're doing great and great, fantastic, yay, terrific. Right? So intellectually we can understand that. But I can still get annoyed. If I still get annoyed, I didn't pass the test. Right? And I didn't internalize what I need to internalize. Right? So
You're saying that once you internalize it, it basically is no longer a problem. That's sort of what you're saying.
Once you internalize it,
it's no longer you can feel that it's no longer.
Right. It becomes where you bring your feeling or brings you up to the point where you've aced the test. Okay, where you've gone ahead, you've perfected that area.
And the difference is how you're feeling, and you can tell based on if you're giving into it or you're letting it go.
Right, sure.
That's basically what
right, and it's learning to internalize those feelings, to actually to mirror what you should be doing, even though you might act kind, which again that's the first level, but now you have to learn not only to act kind, you have to learn to be kind. You understand the difference? Right, it's not just acting; it's actually doing. Right, it's going ahead and it's actually putting it into action, and not just doing the kind action, but it's feeling kind when you do it. Because ultimately, the greatest thing we can strive for is to become godlike, right? And so to go ahead to become these godlike creations. Right? So God doesn't get frustrated with us.
Oh, come on.
Okay, maybe. right? But
That's
God
the mercy. He's still frustrated with us.
right. But He looks down on us. He says, He understands where we're coming from. He understands all of us, right, better than we understand ourselves, right? And He gets it, right? So He's sitting there cheering us on, and that's how we have to become. So we'll get the lessons again and again and again and again. Right? So we have to learn not just to do the right step, but to internalize that, right? To internalize it inside of us. Again, and that's how we become great people. And that's really how we become truly an amazing person. Right? To be able to go ahead and to internalize this piece. You understand? Like that's the real. That's the real hook. That's the real greatness.
You say to internalize it, then is what peace is what brings.
That's really the greatness. I mean, to do the right thing is a big step, right? Which most people don't even get there. But once you do the right thing, but then it's to internalize it and to make it, that's really who you are, not just what you do.
And then you know that because you feel the peace, you know that that's.
Because then you face it.
It's not a test for you.
Ah, very good, right. You get to the point where it's no longer a test because that's who you are. Right? And that's what we want to become. We want to become great people. Right? And we have the potential to become great human beings. And that's where we need to go. We need to go to get to that level. Become great human beings. Right? So it's practicing those steps and internalizing. understand that? Like that's the goal. And so it becomes, that's who we are, not what we do, not just what we do. Right? And that's amazing stuff. It takes a lot of work, and a lot of effort, and lots of lessons. Right? But it's learning that. Right? It's learning that stuff. Again, and again, and again, and one more time. Right? And to get to the point where that's really you.
Until something comes up that drives you so crazy.
Right. Then you get a chance to learn it all over again. Right? But that's what happens. That's what you keep on doing, right? You keep on. It's learning that lesson again and again and again and again, and again and again. Right? And that's really the place. That's really where you really becomes great.
So that's how, and then you can look at a lot of your relationships and understand.
Well, you understand why your relationships are the way they are.
And you understand.
Sure, because they're all meant to help you get to there.
What about the people that just have these relationships where, everything is so wonderful
But
all the time?
Well, it's
You
you
know,
know
and they
why
don't.
you know why it's wonderful? Because they mastered the lesson. Because really, all relationships should be wonderful.
But that means that they just mastered it with each other, right?
They've
Just mastered it with
each other. Okay, right. But once you become a relationship guru, right, or you learn how to do it, so then you can really change all your relationships. Because once you change yourself, then you can change everybody around you. Not by changing them, but by changing you. See, most things that happen have nothing to do with what happened to us. It's what's going on in our own mind. Tell me if this story ever happened to you. Did you ever get an email that you got really upset about? You know what I do whenever I get an email that I get very upset about?
Delete.
No. I close it. I go take like an hour break doing something else, and I go back and I reread the email. And 99 out of 100, that email did not say what I thought it said. Could be 100 out of 100, but 99 out of 100, that's what happened. I mean, I once had a guy call me up and say, "Rabbi, I need your help." I said, "What?" I said, "What happened?" So he says I was friendly with somebody and I blew the relationship. I said, "Well, tell me what happened." So he tells me this whole story, like this whole back and forth and back and forth and forth and back and forth. And I said, "Wow." I said, like, how many days did this take? He said, 20 minutes. He took a friendship, and in 20 minutes he destroyed it. He trashed it. I said, what are you doing? Right? But once we change ourselves, then everything else changes. Right? And what's annoying you about somebody, you want to hear something amazing? My psychologist back in town, I cannot tell you. When you find somebody that's annoying, that somebody does, that you find really annoying to you, you know why it's annoying to you?
It's
In the same way.
Yeah, because you do that same thing. You know what's the most annoying thing about your kids? When they do your mistake. Because they mirror it. They blow it up. They mirror it. Right? That's why it's the most annoying. Because it shows us our shortcomings. So once we learn to fix ourselves, then everything else becomes fixed. I remember that part of this drive. So one of the nice things about this drive is like there's like an hour or two middle of the night when it's too late to call the people on the West Coast and too early to call the people on the East Coast. So you kind of like, and the people in Israel, my people in Israel, they usually talk to fill that time. They actually were in America, so it kind of was like the accurate time to stop and to think. Right? And so I remember thinking, so most people, when they get into a relationship, any relationship, right? Friend relationship, husband, wife, parent, child, right? Each side is coming with the greatest of intentions. Right? He's coming with the greatest of intentions. And the problem is is that when something goes wrong, we start blaming the other person instead of realizing where they're coming from, that it's coming from a good place, they think it's coming from a bad place just to get me. Right? That's like our default position. Why? Because we're not secure enough in who we are and what we are to give the person the benefit of the doubt. And so we go ahead and we destroy the relationship over something that was nowhere, anywhere near where that was supposed to be. You want to hear one of the greatest tools ever to use that way, parenthetically, in a relationship? And somebody says something to you that kind of sounds like off the wall, is to tell the person, let me repeat back what I just heard you say to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. Greatest tools. Right? Because you want to make sure. I once had it was amazing. I once had it, so I repeated to them what the person, and the person was like crazy. And so I said, so did you say A, B, C, D, E? And they said, yeah, that's what I said. I said A, B, C, D, E. And it was like ludicrous. It was something like totally like insulting, demeaning. I was just like one of these things.
But people don't like that.
And so I'm going, and he said, yeah, that's what I meant. I said A, B, C, D, and I get it like 4 times, yeah. So I said, okay, right? I go on the conversation. I ignore it. I still can't be true, right? 30 seconds later, they go, wait a second. Did you mean that you think I said A, B, C, D, E? I said, yeah, that's what I told you 4 times. They said, no, not that. And they told me what they really meant. Right? Because it was like one of those ludicrous things that it can't be, right?
Yeah.
And I checked with them, but I still couldn't believe that they would say such a thing, so I ignored it. You see, sometimes a little humility, just a little, okay, is that we don't know everything, and that we don't know that everything that we heard that we really did just say because we heard it with our own 2 ears. Right? It saves a lot of anguish and a lot of pain. Sorry, Harvey, I'm getting rid of all your patience.
Don't worry about it. Used to be plentiful.
Remember what happened, right? But that's what happens, right? Right? What happens is that we go ahead, right? Just okay. So I didn't understand. That's okay. Life is great. I'm okay. As my wife says, I'm okay. God's okay. We can move on. Right? That's okay. We move on. It'll be the greatest things that will ever happen to you. Right? Okay. So lesson number 4. A lesson is repeated until we get it right. So no rush into solving it. Only put yourself through as much pain as you'd like. And that will just keep on coming until you get it right. Rule number 5. Now this is very important. Learning lessons does not end. There is no end.
But they get harder, right?
There is no part of life that does not contain its lessons. If you are alive, there are lessons to be learned. They do not get harder. They might get more complex because now you're not into A, B, C, D, E. You're into A, B, C, D, E, Q, X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, right? Because now you got along because you've been building up. So lessons become more complicated. Right? But life is all about learning lessons. The reason we're here is to learn lessons. Right? And so therefore, that's what life is. Life is just this cycle of just learning lesson and learning lesson and learning lesson and learning right, and just learning, and taking information and using the information. Right? That's what life is about. Getting that down. Right? So that's really our job. It's just to learn those lessons and to just incorporate them to get them straight. And just to recognize that that's what we're doing here. Right? We're learning, we're absorbing. And as we learn and absorb this information, so we go ahead and we grow and we change and we evolve and we become who we become. Right? And that's why we're here. Right? We're here to learn. We're here to absorb and to learn and to change and to go ahead to become then these super successful people. Right? The ones who get the tests right. Right? Because that's what life's all about. Right? It's not. And realize that what we do, the only part of it that we do control is ourselves. And I think getting ourselves down right and kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, that's really where it's at. Right? And then we go ahead and become great people. Okay, great. So again, does anyone want to repeat back to me the 5 lessons we learned today? 5 out of 11.
Number 1, don't listen to Rabbi Epstein.
No.
Number 2, don't listen.
Pick yourself through. This is not me. This is from the Torah. This is not my.
Number 1, there are no mistakes, right?
No.
According to order?
Yeah, go no. I'm gonna make it harder now. Okay, good. We're out of order. There are no mistakes, only lessons. Good.
Your purpose here is to use your body and your soul to become better.
Right. Okay. Right. And you get a body. Right. It's here for as long as right. You're here all the time. Right. Whether right. That you're gonna keep it because you gotta last you the whole 120 years that you're around.
You want your soul to be in control.
Right. And keep your soul in control.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Go ahead. What else?
Don't worry about if you don't get a lesson because you'll always get it repeated again.
Right. Lessons tend to repeat themselves until we get them right.
Enjoy yourself.
Okay. Good. Right.
They
Go
don't
ahead.
end.
What?
They don't end. You're going to
They
keep
don't
getting
end.
more.
Right. Life is a full-time lesson. Right. It's really all about lessons. There are no successes or failures. And because how we classically define success and failure is not success and failure. The definition of success and failure is learning the lesson, and it might take you to fail to get the lesson. Remember, I'll give you a good example. The football season is very difficult at the end of the football season. Which teams are going to make it into the playoffs. So usually, like at the last week, and there's 16 teams left in the running, and 8 of them are going to make it, and then 8 of them aren't. And sometimes a team has to lose in order to get in. It's like one of these wacky ways that has to work. That in order for them to get in, they have to lose. Right? So sometimes losing is a success. Right? It's if you learn the lesson. Right? To learn the lesson, and then last one is lessons never end. Right? As long as we're alive, we have lessons to learn. And that's a job to keep on learning those lessons.
Also to internalize whatever you're going through.
Right. To internalize and to
Internalize and make peace with
right. And to internalize and to make peace and to really to become that idea, not just doing the steps, but actually becoming the steps. Right? Okay. Excellent. So see you all same bat time, same bat station. Next Wednesday night we'll be back for the Rules Being Human, class number 2.